Okay, so it was my game this week for the Link to the Cast book club, which I need to keep kind of looking at it on the page. I keep nearly saying Link to the Past. I'm not quite used to this yet. But,
I mean, we've been saying that for, a fair few years now, so...
In fairness, yeah. So the Link to the Cast book club I announced last week because I was shocked at your lack of kind of fond memories of the game. Banjo-Kazooie.
I dispute that. I have memories. I enjoyed it when I played it. Just I didn't play it in 1998. I played it in 2008.
So Banjo-Kazooie was a game that originally was going to be on the SNES under a different title, Project Dream, which was going to be about a young boy named Edison who had trouble with pirates. The game eventually went through many kind of different facelifts and arrived in 1998 on the N64. And there's going to be a theme to the games I pick on this show. There's going to be a lot of N64 fondness, because it was my console growing up. But so Banjo-Kazooie comes out in 1998, and it was really kind of... For me, it was around that time where most of the games I would be playing regularly on the N64 were by Rare. Rare at the time were just the best around for me.
They were firing on all cannons, let's be honest.
They really, really were. And which makes it very sad now, which we'll probably get onto at some point during this, to see kind of what's happened in the years since. But at the time, Rare were just the best. If almost as much as the kind of the Nintendo seal of quality. If you saw on the N64 box that Rareware logo, yeah. you knew you were in for a treat.
Yeah.
Right. So I got this game, as I described last week. I was so excited for this game. I was a proper Nintendo fanboy when I was a kid, to the extent where I would refuse to play my friend's PS1 when he was around. I was just like, you picked the wrong console, mate, sorry. Don't want any of your Resident Evil shit like that or anything like that. I would later on become a lot more mature and realize that, I'd missed a lot of these and go back to them. But at the time, I was hardcore N64, to the extent where I would buy Nintendo official magazine every month, and it was the best read I had every month. And I remember following this all through kind of the upcoming title stories about Banjo-Kazooie, getting myself into a fervor over it. And like I described last week on the show, kind of hoodwinking a newsagent into putting aside a copy of the strategy guide for me and all this sort of stuff. It really is kind of, when I think back on kind of games that have brought me to the unfortunate financial obsession I have with video games now, where I kind of spend an unreasonable amount of money on them, Banjo-Kazooie is partly to blame for that. It's a game where even now, at nearly 26, I can just turn on the N64, put in the original copy of Banjo-Kazooie I got in May 1998, fire it up, and I'm still having a grand old time. And it's got all the hallmarks of just rare brilliance. The platforming in it is absolutely solid. It's a collectathon. There's a lot of things to collect in it. There's your jiggies, the jigsaw pieces, there's the Jinjos, things like this. There are a lot of kind of things to collect in the game. And whereas now when I play a game that's kind of a collectathon, I get very, very frustrated and think, oh, for the love of fucking God, there's no way am I collecting everything in this game. But Banjo-Kazooie was one of those games where I was quite happy to stay in that world as long as I possibly could. Collect everything I could, have as much fun as possible. Another thing that really kind of hits home for me, and by now you've probably heard it in the intro to this segment, the soundtrack to Banjo-Kazooie is among my favourite soundtracks in any game. It is just so happy, it's so fun, it's so kind of indicative of... It's just my childhood in a soundtrack, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a brilliant game, to me anyway, at least. I remember it very, very fondly. The game follows a bear and bird duo, Banjo and Kazooie, who attempt to free Banjo's sister Tootie from the evil witch Gruntilda, which is just a kind of nice, kind of playful childhood premise. And kind of through that kind of narrative, you explore, I think it's 9 different worlds. There's, I think, 100 of these jiggies, the jigsaw pieces, the golden jigsaw pieces to collect, which like are a mixture of kind of, some of them you just have to find them, they're out in the world, in the levels, and some of them you have to like complete puzzles or challenges to get them. There's a wide range of kind of different skills, different kind of cool little things you can unlock throughout the game, whether it's kind of, you know, Kazooie shooting eggs, or kind of being able to fly a bit, or kind of going to the shaman and getting changed into different animals to complete different challenges and levels, or, you know, if you're a fan of a cheat code, turning Banjo into a washing machine, which is always fun. No, it's just I don't know. I just remember this game so fondly. What are your thoughts on it? You said you didn't play it at the time, but you came back to it kind of a bit older. I'm curious to hear what your kind of impressions of things are without the kind of the rose tinted glasses I have.
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, Banjo-Kazooie is that kind of collectathon type game, and for me, those kind of games never properly I got into. There's kind of stuff like that and Spyro that I always found to be a little bit tedious. Now, they obviously both have their platforming elements, but those platforming elements certainly weren't as immediate or designed with that focus in mind like a Mario 64. But there is, and this goes for most Rare games and certainly a lot of Nintendo games, there is a pure innocence and charm and just fun. Like, it's just a sense of fun that you get from playing that kind of game. And, you know, Banjo-Kazooie has that, and like I love Grant Kirkhope's stuff. The fucking Viva Pinata soundtrack is just beautiful. Donkey Kong Country is just still holds up today. And yeah, I mean, I find it more to be an exploration game than a platform game.
Yeah, that'd be fair, yeah.
And I mean, it's a kind of game that you can just really just get lost in for, you know, a few days, where you can just really just sit down and just immerse yourself in the world, and all the characters with their kind of funny voices. Yeah. You know, it just has that charm to it.
And it's one of those games where, like, it's a relatively early example in my game playing kind of life, where it was very kind of like that, and Super Mario 64 have this kind of, I don't know how I describe it, kind of non-linearity to them, where you don't necessarily have to go to stage 1, unlock everything on stage 1, progress to stage 2. Kind of a thing. You can come back to levels later on where there's still some jiggies, or in Mario where there's still some stars you haven't unlocked yet. And particularly in Banjo-Kazooie, when you've got kind of more and more skills, there are some that are layered in where you kind of, it's forcing you to come back to the level later when you've gone to another level and unlocked, you know, skill X. It was one of the very first examples of that, where I can kind of like explore the world, or as much of the world as I kind of can when I've unlocked. There are kind of these doors where you collect musical notes. There's 100 in each level, and depending on the amount of notes that you have, it unlocks various parts of the whole overworld. So it was kind of like one of the first games I played, particularly on the N64 anyway, that kind of said, right, okay, you decide what order you want to do all these things in. And like, there are still some I haven't played. Like, my most recent full playthrough of the game, start to finish, was I think last summer. I just cracked out the N64 and just kind of played it non-stop for a couple of days. And one of the things I love about it is that whereas, you know, it's still got all that, you know, the childhood memories, stuff like that, I'm still being brought back to 1998 when I was like 8 years old, and how much fun I had then. But there are still challenges in it. Like, if you want to go back and try complete it 100%, there are still challenges to it that fucking frustrate me still to this day. There's particularly one, I think it's in, what's it called? Is it Rusty Bucket Bay or something like that? Where there's one, there's Jiggy hidden behind a turbine on the bottom of a boat that still drives me absolutely mental to this day. And I do appreciate that the game does, like, it's one of those ones. There's a lot of games that I've held on to over the years from the N64 era in particular, that like I can still go back to now and have as much fun as I used to with them. Much like, you kind of, we were saying about Link to the Past last week. And I think that's going to be like a theme going forward. They're games that we loved then and that we still love now.
How, I mean, have you played Banjo-Tooie.
Oh, of course, yes, I have. There was no way was I not getting Banjo-Tooie after Banjo-Kazooie.
So
Banjo-Tooie is interesting to me, firstly because there was an attempt, a real kind of, and we talk about Nintendo really shooting the moon and trying to do real crazy stuff. There was this idea they had about really weird, kind of obscure, hidden items in Banjo-Kazooie. I don't know if you kind of encountered this, but that would form something called I want to say it's the shop and swap or stop and swap.
I have heard about this, yeah.
Right? So the idea was going to be the stop and swap, that's what it was. The idea was that if you collect all these, it would then transfer to the sequel, Banjo-Kazooie, or Banjo-Tooie, by, I don't know, taking out the cartridge really quickly or something like that. But kind of, they realised, having already put it in the game and put out the finished game, that the N64 was kind of limited and couldn't really do that. So there's kind of these weird, obscure items that are very, very hard to find in the game. I think there's one you might accidentally run across, if I recall correctly. There's like a key frozen in a block of ice. But apart from that, the rest of them you would almost need to be shown where they are. They're that kind of out of the way. But they just kind of still exist there in the game, which I appreciate. That kind of like, they just didn't bother taking it out. And kind of later on then, when they came to Xbox Live, they completed that where you could carry over into the next game. I believe what it eventually did was if you got all the stop and swap, if I'm not mistaken, if you got all the stop and swap items in Banjo-Kazooie, it unlocked a trailer for the video game classic, Nuts and Bolts. Which we're not going to sully this
what a prize.
This reminiscence with that. But no, Banjo-Tooie, the thing about that was I enjoyed Banjo-Tooie, but to me, if Banjo-Kazooie came out today, Banjo-Tooie would be the DLC we get 4 or 5 months down the line. You know what I mean? It was kind of, it wasn't different enough to justify it being a different game. It wasn't like, say, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, where Ocarina of Time, one of the great games of all time, Majora's Mask, one of the great games of all time, they are not...
It's a little bit better.
They are...
I will do this every week.
I know you will. You're just going to keep shoehorning that in, even if we don't bring it up. But wildly different games. You know what I mean? Like, Ocarina of Time is fantastic, but like Majora's Mask, and I might be inclined to agree with you on your Majora's Mask campaign, just because like it's so weird and different and like unlike any other Zelda game, really.
Just if nothing else, like they're drastically different in their tone.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's saying Kazooie and Tooie pretty much follow a similar theme and path.
Like I said, like I wouldn't say they're like two halves of the same game, because that would be to say that Banjo-Kazooie doesn't feel complete. It does. But it is basically like I said, it would be the equivalent today of DLC. It's like, you've had this game for a few months, how about some more levels and a couple of more skills? You know what I mean?
Which doesn't necessarily sound like the worst.
No, I still had a whale of a time with Banjo-Tooie. It just didn't give me that same rush and kind of love and adoration I had the first time round, because I knew what to expect by Banjo-Tooie, which came out, I think, 2 years later, maybe even a little bit less. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up my, like, if you look at it, go back and try and look up reviews at the time, it is kind of, even if you just go onto Wikipedia and look up the aggregate scores and the summary of the reviews for the game, like, it was really kind of critically lauded at the time. Like, it holds a Metacritic score of 92, like, so it's
quite good.
Yeah, for me, it's really an all-time classic. In the same way that, like, my Desert Island games are mostly probably going to be N64 games, and Banjo-Kazooie might well be in there, with like a Mario 64 or a Majora's Mask or something like that.